All right, looks like I am live, and I'm trying out this lapel mic. So hopefully it's actually picking up the audio because I've never actually used the lapel mic before, but the audio quality on the front-facing camera on the iPad is usually leaving quite a bit to be desired. So hopefully this is showing up. And someone please let me know in the chat if the audio is actually showing up. So just chat and say whether or not you can actually hear me, because I'm using this lapel mic. So I can see some people in the chat. You just need to say that you can hear me or not, because that would be really quite helpful. Yes, you can hear me. That is good news, because I've not used this lapel mic before, and hopefully this will help out with the audio quality. So basically right now I'm brewing up some 80s Sheng Pu'er, and that's awesome. And so I don't really have much of a plan. I just want to talk about a couple of the new products that are on HyperionHerbs.com and answer some questions and drink some tea. So basically just this past week, I launched the Lion's Mane extract. I marked the rosebuds and the pearl powder back in stock, and I changed the wild chrysanthemums that I was selling previously, which were just the beautiful open flowers. I changed it to the pure bud. So I'm gonna try and hopefully hold this up. I don't think it's actually gonna show up whatsoever. But basically, instead of the flowers that I was selling before, now I'm basically selling what is the pure bud. So basically, before the flowers have opened, basically they have these pure buds, which contain a lot stronger aromatic compounds. And you can kind of think of it like pretty much once a flower opens up and blossoms, it's kind of like it's somewhat completed its life cycle and basically can basically the aromatic compounds can lessen. But with these pure buds, all of those oils and all the aromatics are still locked in. So it's pretty cool, and it's a higher quality, much higher quality product than the opened flowers that I was selling before. And actually on my end, my cost doubled, if not more than doubled than what I was paying before. And I don't think I've raised the price yet on the website, which I need to do it at some point. So basically, if you want to get those at an even better deal, I'd recommend doing that soon, because my price doubled and I haven't really changed the price yet. But I just, as I usually do, if I find a better quality thing, I usually tend to go for it, which is what happened with Gynostemma. For example, I don't know if anyone remembers a few years ago, I was selling Gynostemma in larger packages and was able to offer much bigger bulk discounts. But then I found a better source, and then my cost over doubled. And then basically, I still didn't raise the price. I just changed the quantity of it a little bit. But it was just, I found something that was way better, and I kind of had to do it because that's really kind of what I'm into. Meaning, if I don't actually want to drink it myself or consume it myself on a regular basis, and is the best that I can find, then I'm really not gonna care to sell it, which is just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of how I've always done things, because that just kind of makes sense. So definitely check out the Pure Bud honey chrysanthemums, because they're super delicious, really kind of calming, really can clear heat, and are just a great tea to have pretty much any time. You can also add it in if you're brewing other pu'er teas. You can add some flowers in there, and it's quite nice. Also, the rosebuds go really well with any other teas, or they can just stand alone. And oftentimes I'll do the rosebuds, the chrysanthemum, and the Gynostemma at night when I want something, and it's just really kind of calming and nice. And then the Lion's Mane extract is 8-to-1 Lion's Mane extract, or 8-to-1 concentrated extract of the Lion's Mane fruiting bodies, which are grown on hardwood, as they should be. So one thing that that I get a lot from people, and actually just someone told me about this yesterday, is a friend of a friend was kind of interested in herbs and had been buying from lots of different companies. And then my other friend was like, dude, you need to buy from Hyperion, or you need to buy from my friend. So he went to my website, bought a bunch of stuff, and then got it and was like, man, I feel bad that I wasted all my money on all this other lower quality kind of nonsense stuff, when in reality this stuff is way better and it's actually at a better price. And I get emails like that all the time, and I have customers that I've had since the beginning, since like 2010 or 11 or something. And it's primarily, I think, for a few reasons. Part of it is like actually understanding what the herbs are and what they should be and what they should do, and then having that come across and be represented in the actual extract powder. Do I ship to the EU? Yeah, I ship to Europe probably on a daily basis. The vast majority of my clients are in America, but I ship to all over Europe, all over Australia, all over that as well. But it just depends. If you're in Germany, let's say, then we definitely can't ship to Germany just because of Germany's regulations, which I have a funny story about that actually. Basically, it's kind of funny because in Germany, these herbs are considered basically drugs, pharmaceuticals, or medicinal substances, which is funny because I think if you ask most people in America about herbs, they'd be like, oh, they don't really do anything. I mean, except maybe like parsley, you just grow it. But like Chinese herbs and all that, that's just placebo. That doesn't do anything. But it's like, well, if it doesn't do anything and it's all placebo, then why is it basically considered a medicinal substance in these countries? And subsequently, I can't ship there from the United States. But I have considered opening a branch in Amsterdam or somewhere in Holland, let's say, to basically be able to ship to the EU and bypass all this German stuff. Just because what I've heard from a lot of people there is there's not really good quality available once you're over there. And in my experience of spending a couple of months in Europe, I have to concur and say that in terms of herbs and supplements, they're generally pretty far behind the game, and there's found it very difficult to find anything good or very useful of any good quality whatsoever. So basically, yes, I can ship to Europe and ship there all the time. How long will I be on live? Maybe an hour or something. I'm not totally sure. It just depends on how the questions keep rolling in, and if I get tired and feel like doing something else, or if I run out of tea, whatever happens first. But I'm basically here to drink tea. I just talked about new products. I'll probably talk about a few more, and then I'll just answer questions. That's basically the gist of what we'll be doing here. Also, I have Super Chat enabled, which I've never used. Not exactly sure how it works, but it is enabled because on one of my other live streams, someone was like, you really need Super Chat. So Super Chat's on there. So if anyone wants to use it, you can be the first. Someone says we want the wild ginseng, bro. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen, as I'm not able to sell that online in any capacity. If we happen to link up in real life, or you come to a tea event or some class that I teach, then perhaps that is probably the only way in which you could try it or experience it. Just because having something so precious and valuable so easily and widely available is generally not a great idea, and not something apparently that I should have done. Let's see. Do you have any more CBD oil? Yeah, if you go to HyperionHemp.com, I have plenty of CBD oil in stock. and it's really, really great stuff. Pretty much, I had closed that business actually for a few months, and then I got a lot of emails from people being like, why did you close it? That was the best CBD oil I've ever tried. You have to bring it back. So I disregarded the first few and I was just like, whatever. But then I got like 12 or 15 of these pretty much identical emails. I was like, all right, I'll get this back up and running. So I did, and it's up. It's hyperionhemp.com. Plenty of it's in stock, and it's the best CBD oil that I found. It's actually a whole plant extraction, so you can call it full spectrum, and it's not derived from isolates. It's not derived from stuff grown in China or Germany or other places that people are growing in. It's actually organically grown hemp from the United States in a full plant profile. So I really like it, and I find it to be effective even in very, very low doses. So let's see, where's the next question? What is your experience with Tai Chi? What do you have teachers that you study under now? My experience of it is good, and it's really impacted and improved my life and my health. I do study with people, but I don't really want to talk about that publicly just because the school's big enough, we have enough students, and we don't really need more people in the school. But in terms of what's commonly and widely available, it's weak sauce and generally has nothing to do with Tai Chi. People think Tai Chi is just slow, relaxed movements with like some deep breathing and maybe some visualization, and you just kind of chill out. Honestly, it has legitimately nothing to do with Tai Chi or anything related to authentic internal arts. It's basically just something someone made up at some point, and it kind of caught on. So I'm sorry I can't be very helpful in that regard, but there are just certain aspects about my personal life and my personal practice that I don't really discuss widely or publicly, just for obviously personal reasons. But there's many other things that I will happily discuss. Just generally when it comes to those subjects, I tend to be a bit more guarded, let's say. But I will say, if you want to learn more and get actually in-depth theory, one thing that I haven't not mentioned on this channel that I've just realized is I have 2 courses currently up on udemy.com. The first one is Foundations of Authentic Qigong Practice or something like that. The other one is Foundations of Tonic Herbalism. So if you go to udemy.com, and I think you can use promo code YouTube or promo code discount or something, and it's 50% off. But either way, if you search my name on Udemy, I did a 2-hour course on basically authentic theoretical foundations for internal training. So I highly recommend checking that out if you want to learn more about my experience or the things that I've been taught or the things that I currently do teach in person on a personal basis. So let's see, where's the next question? So yeah, udemy.com, type in my name, and you'll see some courses on there. Do you still use the Carol K. Anthony version of the I Ching? Any thoughts on her interpretation and system? I don't use her book anymore because I don't use any book at all, actually. Because I was taught a traditional method of generating hexagrams using yarrow sticks and then interpreting those hexagrams without a book. So actually understanding the actual energetics of each trigram and each hexagram, and then how they relate in all the ways you open that up and relate that back to your situation. So I was taught that method, so I generally don't need a book anymore at that point. But when I did use books, I would use one of hers and then Stephen Karcher's book and maybe one other one, and I would kind of compare and contrast their different perspectives on the same thing. But I think her stuff is generally pretty good and pretty helpful, and her bias tends to just kind of make things a bit more dramatic sometimes, but also in many ways it can be sometimes more tangible and relatable. in the sense of the way our mindset is influencing a situation, and perhaps how we can adjust our approach. So I would still recommend it. Definitely check it out. Let's see. Having anxiety after a breakup. From a spiritual true self point of view, how can I reach success, avoid anxiety, and be effective? I guess it depends on what do you mean by success. I don't think it's possible to avoid anxiety, and it depends on what you mean by being effective. So generally, by being effective, you need to know what it is that you need to do, so then you can know if you're effectively doing it. And generally that will allay anxiety. So if there's a lot of anxiety around something, usually it's good to say, well, what can I actually do? And it could even write out a list of things that could be done. And oftentimes maybe there's things that we're putting off or things that we're avoiding, so we could just do those. And then usually that can sort out the anxiety. Or perhaps it's just our perspective needs to adjust and realize maybe we can control it, maybe we can't. But trying to get our perspective a bit more accurate and relevant to the situation, and making sure that we're not just making things up and making our situation more difficult, or we're not just flagellating ourselves for some odd reason. So those are follow-up thoughts and feedbacks to those questions. But if you answer the questions that I asked to your question, I can be more specific. What is your opinion on Kratom? It has changed my life. Kratom, I was pretty into it for probably, maybe 6 months. It's definitely not a tonic herb. It's definitely not free of side effects. It definitely has side effects. But I would say that there probably are situations where that it could help people. If you're trying to get off opiates, or you're dealing with significant pain, or you're dealing with significant addiction or anxiety, depression, or something like that, and you're trying to find a natural alternative. But in my experience, it was pretty dehydrating and pretty imbalancing on the liver and the kidneys. So it's just probably having an accurate perspective over what it is, that perhaps maybe it could be a useful short-term solution. But to say that it's a daily drink or a tonic herb is not something I would say. But occasionally it probably could be a good buzz if it's in that context. It kind of depends on where you're coming from. But you just have to understand that with a lot of things, there's generally no free ride. So if you're getting a big up, you can easily prepare yourself for a big down. And obviously making major lifestyle choices and changes is a better long-term strategy. So it kind of just depends. Let's see. Person says they got addicted to Kratom, and long-term users reported chronically low testosterone levels. To me, it probably just depletes people's adrenals in their kidneys. And when I took it, one weird side effect that I noticed is that it became near impossible to, let's say, reach completion in the act of intercourse. I could go for forever, but to actually finish and be done, that would take days sometimes, and was quite effort. So perhaps it has benefit in that regard, but I found it to be kind of annoying after a while, and it's probably not a great thing to be doing. Next question, will you have young or fresh pu'er too? Probably not, because I'm more into aged stuff at this point. Like this one I'm drinking is from the early 80s. I just tend to be more into aged teas as of late, although I've had some incredible young and green pu'ers, but it's just not really what I'm into at the moment. And just kind of there's a lot of websites that have pretty decent young pu'er, so that's fine. Whereas my focus is more on specific aged qualities that have specific relaxing and sedating type of effects. So let's see. I take 5 grams in the morning and 5 grams at night. Wow. That's a lot of kratom. Have you ever experimented with Blue Lotus? I have. My only experience with Blue Lotus is essential oil that I have, and the smell on that is amazing. And I do notice a nice aromatherapy effect, but I've never taken it internally or used it beyond just the essential oil, or I would think it was actually an absolute of the flower, and it was really quite good. So let's see the next question. Actually, one thing that I do want to mention, since part of it is new products, is my oral care oil that I've been working on for like 3 or 4 months. I should have it ready to go next week. And I made some pretty good breakthroughs on it in terms of I added reishi spore oil as one of the main ingredients, which no one's really doing for oral care oil. And so far, just from the handful of people that I've let use it, they've reported way less sensitivity with their, say, some people had existing cavities. It helped diminish their sensitivity. And then one person, the dentist was like, oh, you need to have a root canal because you're having this tooth pain and perhaps infection. But then after using the oil for like a day, their pain has subsided and they just keep using it once or twice a day and they don't have any more pain. And then for my own experience, it dramatically decreased my teeth sensitivity to like hot and cold liquids or various acids, things like that. So that was a great benefit. Another thing I am working on, now that the oil is done, I'm starting to work on things to help remineralize and re-strengthen the enamel. So I'm experimenting with lots of different grades of pearl powder and various different combinations of things to actually build up the enamel. It's because that's rather important. So that oral care oil will be coming out hopefully sometime next week or the week after. I just need to get some labels and stuff together for that, but the actual formula is dialed in and pretty much ready to go. Next question. What do you think of White 2 tea? Honestly, never been impressed. I think I have their 2005 Naka, which was like famous on the internet to get you stoned and lay you out. The flavor was kind of gross. It was like harsh and bitter and astringent at times, but the effects were nice. But most of the other stuff I've tried from them, it's kind of just like, meh, that's just fine. But again, for most people, they probably would like it and think it's good, and I have friends that are into it. But for me, again, my bandwidth of focus is narrow and small on specific things, and I'm looking for specific qualities. Like this tea has strong camphor flavors to where when you taste the back of your mouth, it's like tastes like cinnamon candy or something. Now has a nice sweetness, slightly woody, and then a touch of the agarwood or incense flavor. And I'm probably like 15 brews into this, and it's still coming out with a nice color. And I'm actually starting to feel the it's like squishing me into the ground. And that's one thing that's interesting about some of these teas is like some of them will unfold in waves. Some of them you'll be 5 brews in and you're like, wow, this has got something. Some of them once you get into like 8 or 10, then they actually really open up and then start to really get into your body. And then the next 5 or 10 brews really come in. I'm sorry if it's a little bit loud right now. I'm like having to reheat the water. So my apologies if you can hear that. Hopefully you can't hear it, but to me I can hear it because it's pretty loud. I'm sitting next to you. So let me know if you can hear it and it's obnoxious, and I'll be sure to be mindful of that in the future. Where's the next question? When do you think your teas will be available? Probably a few weeks, because I've just had a big stack at home in my apartment that I've had to sort through and sample and try to decide which ones I want to sell and which ones are really great. And I think I've got that dialed in, so hopefully it'll just be a few weeks. I should put my order in the next couple of days. Also, again, I have the super chat turned on because someone in one of my other chats said turn on super chat, but I've never actually used it. So if anyone wants to be the first super chat person, feel free. Let's see, what's the next question? What's your opinion on monoatomic supplements like Ormus or monoatomic gold? Honestly, a lot of it's probably pretty whack. In Ormus in general, to me, Ormus is just a running joke between me and some of my friends because it's so absurd and kind of ridiculous. Not to say that I haven't taken lots of Ormus products, and there wasn't a phase maybe like 15 years ago when I was into it, but at this point it seems pretty ridiculous. If you want to take gold, I would say like the angstrom gold or the angstrom minerals are probably better, or the ionic colloidal type golds. Those are probably better if you're gonna get into that world at all. But other than that, I think Ormus is kind of absurd and hokey. And I don't really, it's just another one of those things where it's like, doesn't make the natural or alternative industry look very good to the outside world. Because it's just kind of, what is Ormus? Oh, well, what isn't Ormus is the better question. Let's see, let me find the next question. Let's see. How does aged oolong compare to aged pu'er? Do they have some crossover? I mean, they're very different since they are from different species, kind of. Aged oolongs are usually from little tea bushes. Pu'er is usually from trees. Originally, it should be from big old trees, but it's also now grown from bushes. But I've not really experienced that many aged oolongs that had a lot going on. I've had a few that were pretty great, but aged oolongs tend to be a bit more rare. It's not really, hasn't been a big popular thing for a very long period of time. And oftentimes you sometimes have to ask, well, why did they age it? Why didn't they just sell it fresh? Sometimes people age their oolong because they couldn't sell it or it wasn't very good. So they're like, let's just sit on it for a decade and then we'll be able to sell it and make our money back. So it kind of just depends. I have some aged oolongs from the 80s, the late 80s in my cabinet that are pretty decent. But if they were to go toe to toe with some of these aged pu'ers, I would choose the aged pu'er pretty much any day of the week, because the aged oolongs tend to just be like maybe kind of cognac-y or maybe kind of like dried fruit and slightly sweet. But it tends to just be kind of like one-dimensional. But I'm also a bit biased because of what I like and what I don't like. Let's see. To specify the question, success in the context of getting a job, financial stability, and having social anxiety in regards to interviews, effective, productive, and habits throughout the day. I don't know, because I'm not the person to ask about getting a job, since I never was really very good at jobs. So basically what I would say is basically doing things in your own life to strengthen and support your own sense of feeling centered, whatever that is or means for you, and or defining specifically what you need to do or what you want to do, and then looking at how you can accomplish it. Because that's really you can't measure something that you haven't defined. You can't hit a target that you can't see, basically. But in terms of some of the other questions, I would probably just browse my channel and look at my older videos, and I've made quite a few videos on those subjects. I think one was specifically about how to find, or it was like advice for young people who feel lost or something like that. But if you just scroll through or search through on my older videos, you can find plenty of things about those issues in specific. Let's see. What do you think is the first thing I should replace or try if I'm starting to use natural and better products? Let's see, where to start. I would say we could start with salt and water and perhaps oils. So if you cook or eat food at home, look at the salt you use. If it's like Morton's iodized salt or some table salt, throw it away. Get like a pink Himalayan salt or like a Celtic sea salt as a basis. Or if you're in America, you can get real salt. That's from Utah or something, I think. Upgrading your salt, good choice. Upgrading your water, drinking tap water, getting off of the tap water. If you have a local spring, you can go to findaspring.com, see if there's a local spring nearby. You can get, there's probably local places that'll just deliver spring water to your house. Just make sure that it's not treated or they don't add chlorine or fluoride to it, because some companies are ridiculous. Oh, it's spring water. Well, why does it have the stuff in it? It's not really what the word means. So just salt and water, good things to upgrade. Could also get a shower filter. Just order one on Amazon that will start filtering out chlorine and fluoride and make the water coming out of your shower a lot better, which will make your skin probably less dry and we won't have like gunk in your hair when you get out of the shower. Also, upgrading oils that you cook and consume. Getting coconut oil, grass-fed butter, grass-fed ghee, high-grade olive oil, pumpkin seed oil, things like that. Those are really pretty easy places to start. You could even add in something like gynostemma, which you can get at HyperionHerbs.com. You could go with holy basil or Tulsi, which you could get at pretty much any health food store or Whole Foods or something like that. Super easy, super cheap, really a great, a great herb. Let's see. What do you think of the work of Rostin C., PhD on unconditional basic income? Not familiar with that person or their specific take on that theory, but there is the guy, I can't remember his name, he was on Joe Rogan not too long ago, and he's considering, or he's saying he's going to run for president, and part of his part of his basis is universal basic income, like giving everyone $1,500 or $2,000 a month or something like that. So it's again probably a complicated issue, a complicated solution, which obviously in theory sounds good, but in execution seems about right. Let's see. What's your opinion on Schizandra? It's a pretty good herb. I think it's a matter of quality, and it's really good in formulas. I don't know if it's that amazing to be consuming in large quantities by itself all the time, but in formulas and in specific situations, it's quite great. Yeah. Let's see. What are the best remedies for clearing the stuff in the back of your throat? I don't know. Neti pot, maybe? Salt water gargles and rinses. Perhaps that is a good place to start. You can also do like essential oil steams. So you get a bowl of steaming hot water, put some eucalyptus, peppermint oil, lavender oil in there, put your face over it, put a towel over it, and just breathe that through your sinuses. That could be helpful. But other than that, I don't really know. Perhaps eliminating the things from your diet that are causing excess mucus. What would you recommend for excessive nocturnal emissions, both herbally and diet or lifestyle wise? I don't know. Maybe sorting out those things during the day, perhaps having a good relationship or a good partner to engage in these activities with. Otherwise, I don't know. That's a good question. Kidneys probably need some work. That's probably what I would say, but I can't really think of anything else. Do you know about your straw man name? No idea what that even means. You don't personally practice semen retention? No. I think that's kind of a poorly understood idea, and I'm not really a fan of it, to be quite honest. I've practiced it at certain parts of my life, and I think in general, in many situations, depending on the context and the length, it's actually harmful to people's health. If people are like reading Montauk Chia or like ridiculous Taoist sex books that are like, oh, hold your semen in because it's your jing, those are all completely incorrect. And Michael Wynn actually came out Michael Wynn came out a couple years after all those books came out and was like, yeah, we don't recommend this. This is actually no good. Let's see. Can you talk a bit more about why you think it is a poorly understood idea? Why I think it's poorly understood, because generally people pull it from what they have been told is Tantra, or what they've been told is Taoist or Chinese medicine. But what people think that it is actually has nothing to do with what either of those traditions actually meant. There's a tremendous misunderstanding, and it really has nothing to do with really anything. And basically, there's one way to understand it, which is if someone wants to be a celibate or a total renunciate, within these traditions, these were only people who were complete and total renunciates, meaning renounce their name, their gender, their family, all of their inheritance, all their ties to the world. They are 100% all in. Subsequently, they renounce their sexuality, so they just squash it. So people in modern times will have these fantasies about that and be like, oh, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to just not do that. I'm just going to cut myself off from that part of my functionality as well. And that's not a good idea, generally. So the foundational assumptions and basis and the reasons why people are doing it are all incorrect and don't have anything to do with any of these traditions, which is why I'm saying it's poorly understood. The other reason is that people will be like, oh, well, it's like semen, it's like your ojas from Ayurveda, or it's like your jing from Chinese medicine. So if you ejaculate, you're going to lose your jing. That's not really what it means. And if anyone actually thinks or believes that, that is basically functioning at a very kindergarten level understanding of Chinese medicine and Chinese philosophy. But it's like kind of where people have to start, but in actuality has nothing to do with the greater part of the tradition. And if you want to learn more about that, because it's a kind of a bigger subject, if you type in what is Jing, I have that video up for free on my other YouTube channel that I had to start once this one was deleted. And I think it's like a 30-minute explanation of what the actual concept of Jing actually means in a slightly deeper way, and how it has nothing to do with your sexual fluids. So yeah, and it's a slightly offensive and disrespectful thing that's happened in modern times, where all of these concepts from all these traditions and cultures are just commodities or buzzwords or slogans or cool things that people do, but generally don't have any connection or basis within the place that they actually originate from. Which, you know, it is what it is. This is the world we live in, this modern times, but it's just kind of nauseating a little bit personally, and it's also why I generally won't discuss certain things publicly, because the general understanding of it is so poor, and that it's almost not even People are oftentimes incapable of having a conversation because they're like, oh, I read Montauk Chia. It's like, and I don't know. But I will say that there could be times where that kind of thing could be beneficial. Like if someone is just really, let's say, super addicted to porn and sexuality and all this type of thing, then usually going without or abstaining or going cold turkey could be beneficial. Certain personality types can just do that. However, it's still not very healthy for most people and generally just causes more type of imbalance. It's kind of almost reminds me of like food, where people get into this whole thing about like, oh, we need to not eat food. We need to eat as little as possible. We need to be breatharians. We need to fast. We need to not need anything from the outside world. It's like, why do you hate yourself so much? Like, why do you hate your life that much that you can't derive any enjoyment or any healthy satisfaction from being alive, from basic biological functions? So it's like people are like, oh, sex is bad and ejaculating, it's a loss. It's like, is it? I mean, I guess if it's divorced from a loving connection with another person, then it can be depleting. Like if it's just you jerking it by yourself with your computer, yeah, that's probably not the most sustainable or healthy habit for the long term. But if you have a connection with someone and you're sharing this experience together, then sure, you might ejaculate and feel some release and letting go, but there's a lot more to the equation there. Which on that note, basically what actual real Taoist sex practices are and function to do is harmonize people together so they can connect more deeply. It's pretty much what the practices are trying to do. It has nothing to do with hold your semen forever and shoot your energy up your spine and through your partner. Like this is just nonsense. This is people's just insanity. And sometimes people get really addicted to the basically the rush. And what happens is they're just overheating their nervous system, which over time the bottom will fall out. The bottom will drop out over trying to just build and hold and contain and stimulate and overheat. When that's all they're really doing. It's not qi, it's not jing, it's not spiritual. It's literally just overheating and cooking the nervous system. Like that's functionally what people are doing. So that's kind of why I'm not really a proponent and why I think it's kind of an absurd notion. But I understand why people can do it, because when I was like 20, 21, I was like, oh, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold my jing and do all these things. And then eventually I'm like, actually what happened is I met an actual legitimate Chinese medicine practitioner, someone who was skilled in internal arts, and was like, he was like, actually, dude, you need to chill on this, and here's really what the deal actually is. I was like, oh, thank you. Anyways, hopefully that is somewhat hopeful. But again, look up my video on Jing, or you can go to udemy.com. I have my tonic herb course, Foundations of Tonic Herbalism, where I talk about all of the 3 treasures in greater depth. I also have my Qigong course on there. This is a huge advertisement for my courses on Udemy. So basically go there, type in my name, check out the courses. You can learn a lot more. And then I have on my other YouTube channel, I put Jing and Shen on there, I think, for free. And each of those, I think, is like 20 minutes or so, but it's a more in-depth exploration of what those concepts actually kind of mean. Is there an accessible system of authentic esoteric practice for the layman practitioner? No, because those are like square peg in a round hole. Like, it's one of those things where you get in what you put in. And the barrier to entry is so high that it will basically prevent lay people or casual people from going very deep, because it's like, for example, let's say you want to learn Qigong, right? Which now everyone's like, oh, I know Qigong. I did a workshop. I did a weekend thing. Or, oh, I watched a video on YouTube. Or I did a thing on Gaia.com or something, right? When literally all that is probably funny movements and maybe some deep breathing, maybe some visualization. So in essence, at most, it might be a little bit relaxing, at most. Because if you literally just do anything, like you just go for a walk, but actually just focus on your body and your breathing, it'll probably do more than those things would. And I think people are better off just taking a bubble bath or something. Like that would probably do a lot more for people. Like 3 times a week, I'm going to put 5 pounds of Epsom salt in there and I'm going to soak in it. I'd probably think that's a bit more effective. Because the barrier to entry is like, it's going to take 3 to 5 to maybe 7 years just to convert your body or your system over to the point to be able to perhaps begin that practice. So you're looking at like basically going all the way through education again just to be able to graduate, just to maybe start the study. And 3 years is like you do every day for like 2 to 4 hours. So obviously if that goes down, then the time goes wider and the time goes out. And honestly, it's not really accessible for most people, and I don't think it should be, honestly, either, because it's like, for the casual person who wants to be a millionaire, what should I do? It's like, it's not generally how it works. Like generally, there's a big learning curve or some education, or perhaps maybe just really good luck or really good fortune. Someone will just say, hey, just do this, and then, but that's my opinion, and it might not be very politically correct or optimistic, but it's based on my experience. Let's see. Next question. Can you talk about how long it takes to heal over trauma symptoms? Honestly, there really is not an answer for that, to be quite honest, because it depends on what that is, depends on what the symptoms are, depends on a whole wide gamut of variables, and there's no fixed or set thing. And also I think the vast majority of the common approaches that are out there are incorrect and ineffective, because generally how people approach it is wrong, because they're like, oh, I have this anxiety, so I'm going to attack it. I'm going to attack the anxiety and I'm going to get rid of it, or something like that. Or I need to get rid of this anxiety because it's bad. Just from that alone, it's never going to happen, because you're already just going to reinforce the negative thing. Like whatever the positive thing you do is just going to reinforce the negative, because in your mind, you're like, this thing's bad, I got to get rid of it. When in actuality, what generally is slightly more effective is forgetting about it and moving on, and then doing something so that the actual emotional reaction or quality to that thing just dissipates and eventually just becomes neutral. Because it's a really common thing where people are like, oh, I have trauma, I have anxiety, I have all these things, so I need to like do the opposite. Now I'm like happy, or I'm blissed, or I'm spiritual, or I'm in the moment, or whatever. But it's actually like, how about neutrality? Which maybe that's harsh, or maybe that's like, oh, he doesn't understand what it's like. But I actually do understand what it's like from someone who's had a pretty fair deal of fucked up shit happen in their life, or traumatic things, or health problems of a wide variety. So I'm speaking from my own personal experience after trying tons of stuff, making bunches of mistakes, and then actually making some progress in some things. So that's kind of what I would say. There's really no fixed thing, and I think it's a bigger conversation around that subject. And I think generally what's commonly out there is not very good or very effective, obviously. But there are some things that are. But I'd have to sit and think and organize and get everything together. But unfortunately, in this moment, my brain is too cooked to be more articulate or helpful than that. Can you talk about how old are you? 34? Yeah, 34. Are you alt-right? No. Do you still do I Ching readings? I think I talked about that earlier, but basically I learned how to generate hexagrams from just using Yarrow stocks, and then be able to interpret the energetics of each trigram and hexagram, and being able to read all of that without necessarily a book. But I still think it's a great thing to do, so I would check it out. Let's see, I think I missed some questions. Are you going to sell incense or oud oil? I am going to try to sell both. I'm actually in the process of trying to source those things, but it's rather difficult because the quality of a lot of it is just awful. And I've bought a lot of fake nonsense where literally I'll get the package and I'll be excited, like, cool, here's this sample. Open it up, straight in the trash. Open it up, straight in the trash. Like, that's happened a handful of times. But I have some stuff on the way in the next couple weeks that I think will actually be all good. Let's see. Are you going to sell Starwood? I don't know what that is. If you could be more specific, maybe. But I guess I'm not going to sell it if I never heard of it. Mostly just going to be agarwood and agarwood related things. What's your opinion on gender fluid? Taste, smell? I'm not sure what that means. Is there like a fluid for gender? What's it taste or smell like? I don't know what that question is asking. Am I going to sell agarwood? Yeah, that's the plan. Hopefully soon. But I've got a lot of stuff coming that will be excellent. And even I've got a bunch of samples. I'll see if I can flip this around. Boom. So it's just like a bunch of samples that I'm working through right now. Lots of wood around here and lots of incense and oils and tons of things that I'm working on and sampling through. Let's see. Next question. What are some good shows, movies that you have enjoyed recently? The Magicians on Sci-Fi is pretty good. Billions on Showtime is pretty good. High Maintenance Season 3 on HBO was pretty good. Crashing with Pete Holmes is pretty funny. But other than that, I haven't really watched TV in a few months. But in the last couple weeks, I just kind of felt like watching it and caught up on a lot of those shows. But I haven't really seen a movie in quite a long time, to be honest. So we'll see. Oh, Maniac on Netflix. I did watch that, but I did not care for it at all, really. It was just kind of annoying and confused. But I think I watched it on a long flight. Next question. Do you want to destroy all nations, or would you preserve the culture of all humans? Meaning, do you want a singular monoracial human, or do you prefer diversity? What the fuck? Never thought about any of those things, so I don't have an answer. Is your perception more vivid than before you got into Eastern ideas? I think so. It's also the fact when I got into Eastern ideas, I was like 14 and I'm 34. So I would hope after 20 years. Let's see. What are your thoughts on Liu Bao and Liu An? When aged, does it compare to age poor in your experience? I'm actually sampling some good Leo Bows as well that I will hoping to sell. Some of them are quite nice. Leo on, I'm not. Leo on, I'm not too well versed in. Honestly, the only Leo I've had two Leo ons. One of them was like 2017 from Global Tea Hut, and it was disgusting. I just threw it away. Another one was from 1940s, and that was really good, super smooth. So my Leo on experience is pretty extreme, but yet also quite limited. Let's see. Hopefully that answers your question on Leo Bow and Leo on, but I have some good 80s Leo Bow that I'll be hopefully selling. Oh man, I wanted to hear you think it through. That's what makes me all right. I want to preserve nations. Okay, I don't know what you're on about, but whatever floats your boat, I guess. What do you have to say about copper vessels versus other material? In regards to what context specifically? I've not really worked with copper vessels in any capacity, so I'm not particularly sure what that's related to or what the context is. Next question is, what is your own practice schedule like? Qigong, etc., assuming you do practice. My schedule, like what time or what? I mean, I'm usually training 2 to 4 hours a day, pretty much every day, for the most part. Except for today, I think I only trained for maybe 90 minutes because I was kind of tired and I had a meeting in the middle of the day. I had a couple meetings in the middle of the day that I had to do. And then afterwards, I was just like pretty wiped because yesterday I did about 4 hours. And then previously over the last weekend, I did a 4-day workshop. We were training like 5-6 hours a day for 4 days in a row. So that's about it. And tomorrow I'll probably be in for quite a lot more hours as well, but I have to watch it sometimes so I don't overdo it and cook myself. Because that is definitely a thing that is possible and something that I've done. So I'll just be mindful to not overdo it or push myself too hard because it's definitely something that is possible. More is not always better. Next question. If you could have been on the Amistad's Majan voyage, would you have ridden up top or below? No idea what that means. I would like to know a general regular routine and daily ritual you practice daily. I can walk you through my day. Usually wake up at 6 a.m. Sometimes like 5:30, but usually 6. And then I'll, hit the bathroom, brush my teeth, do all those things, drink some water, and then usually get some coffee going. Or if I'm cooking breakfast, I'll like put some vegetables in the oven to roast, just because that takes like an hour or so. So hit the coffee. That's usually like MCT oil, butter, 8 ounces of coffee done pour over. And then lately it's been 2 teaspoons of lion's mane, some reishi spores, and some reishi mushroom. I usually sip on that for like an hour while I'm doing some work, doing emails, or filming videos, or whatever work I need to do for that day, which is usually all of those things, plus a bunch of other stuff, since I have a lot of projects going all the time. Then I usually eat around 9, 8:30 or 9, usually I try to eat. And then I usually eat, rest a little bit, go for a walk for maybe half an hour. Then I'll come back and train for maybe 2 or 3 hours. Then maybe I'll have some tea for a few hours, or 1 or 2 hours maybe, or sometimes not at all. Sometimes I'll just go right back to work, doing videos or emails or product things or whatever. It could be related to various businesses. Could be doing phone calls, could be doing meetings, could be, you know, those things. And then I usually have lunch. Then I'll usually train again for another maybe 90 minutes or 2 hours. Then maybe some more tea, then dinner, and then usually shower, rest, go to bed. The exception to that is, let's say I will hang out with friends, then I'll just usually train and then hang out with friends the rest of the day, or train and then meet up with friends at night. But still in between all of that is work and training. So basically my life is pretty boring, but I enjoy it because it consists around things that are important to me, meaning training, work, friends, family, relationships, things of that nature. That's basically almost every day, unless I'm traveling or doing something else. Can you make a video on the hexagrams you are working now? I'm not working in any hexagrams right now. I haven't done the I Ching in a few months, so I can't go any further into that because I'm not like a regular active user. But I'm sure I will be more in the future, but just recently I have not been super regular in that practice, so I'm sorry I could not answer that more deeply. Can you expand on what that training has brought you? I mean, in a general sense, my health is way better, stronger, happier, more intelligent. My sleep is better. My digestion's better. My understanding of the things is deeper. My ability to appreciate tea and agarwood and things like that is deeper. My respect and reverence for these traditions is deeper. My passion for it is stronger. And it's, in a general sense, it has completely rearranged and changed my personality and my outlook on life. Which may or may not be, and then obviously it's completely changed my appearance, which may or may not be obvious from looking at my older videos. So that's pretty much all I will say about it openly, because again, a lot of it is personal to me and I don't want to share it publicly, and a lot of it is also just on a need-to-know basis, meaning unless you have the similar experiences which precede certain things, then me telling you certain things doesn't make any difference. It's like pretty irrelevant. So I know this is perhaps weird or cagey, but that's just kind of how I work. Let's see. Boom, 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 boom. Oh yeah, let's see. Man, some good questions. Hopefully that answers your question a bit. What does that training look like? Honestly, it's standing, sitting, moving. It's one of these things where you can't judge a book by its cover, let's say. But it's not anything that I'm ever going to like demonstrate or show off on the internet, because I think that's kind of gross. But maybe someday, I don't know. Okay, let's see. To what degree does the type of teaware affect the brewing of tea? For instance, I Ching teapots really best when compared to porcelain gaians, pure silver, or something like lava clay. Honestly, it kind of depends on what type of tea you're brewing, but the differences are noticeable. If you brew all of those things side by side, you will notice distinct differences. I've done that before, where I put the same tea using the same water, the same temperature, the same brewing time, meaning like one steep, one steep, one steep, and then taste each steep from a clay pot, a lava clay pot, a porcelain gaiwan, and a silver pot, and they are different. What I personally just use like there's tea in there. I personally just use a I Ching pot. Let me see if I can show you. So I mostly just use this pot. This is about 40 plus years old. It was aged for like 40 years before we started using it. But this is an authentic I Ching pot, and it was like $500. And the shape of this one is really quite nice, and it really makes the tea much rounder and smoother. I don't really like these weird, jagged, strange shaped pots or like square pots, like artistically cool, but in terms of the flavor of tea, not a big fan. Although maybe in some instances it does make it better, I don't know. But I am trying to source and sell some teapots on my website that are good, good clays, have the right shape. So I have those on the way, and they should be here next week. I'll be sampling, and then hopefully I'll pick one of them that's good, and I'll be able to offer an actual good teapot to people at a good price. Because if people are going to be buying really good aged tea, they need to be able to brew it in a way that brings out those qualities. But really, you got to have good tea, you got to have good water, you got to have a good device or a good vessel. That's really the key. Let's see. What would you recommend someone who is serious about wanting to learn Qigong, also who travels around the world all the time? Honestly, I would recommend buying my course on Udemy because it'll provide a lot of foundational, basic theoretical concepts to then be able to sort through and at least start to understand something is authentic versus something that isn't. Like, I think I even have one video where it's like, what gives an internal art actual potency? What does internal actually mean? Just basic things like this that generally people don't define. But that's what I would recommend, at least to start, because there's a lot of really valuable information in there. And I think I'm charging like $12, so it's kind of absurd. Let's see. I'll go back. Is meditation worth practicing without a teacher? Well, I would say that a couple things. No one is actually meditating. No one that's openly out there teaching meditation has ever actually meditated in their life. Because meditation has a very specific meaning within these traditions, and it has nothing to do with what people think it is. What people do and what people teach could be perhaps mindfulness, or perhaps just paying a little bit more attention or having some more awareness of their mind sometimes. But even still, I've met a lot of Vipassana people, a lot of mindful people, and they tend to be the most out of touch people that I've ever met. Like, some of the most actually grounded, realistic people that I've ever met are not in these communities. They're not spiritual. They're not into these things. So it's really kind of a tricky thing. But if someone just wants to learn relaxation, or to chill out or mellow out a little bit, or perhaps have more awareness over their thoughts, sure. Is that meditation? Not at all. It has nothing to do with it. Meditation isn't just sitting there trying to wrestle with your thoughts, like, oh, I can't have thoughts, I gotta get rid of my thoughts. It's not, I'm watching my thoughts go by like clouds, or it's not just, I am drinking this cup. I am aware of the cup in my hands. I can feel the warmth of the cup. I taste the tea in my mouth. I taste the aroma. Like, that's not meditation. That literally just is what it is, meaning paying a bit more attention and acknowledging that I'm paying more attention, but then acknowledging that I'm paying more attention, like, it just creates this infinite insanity loop. So, let's see. Next question. Can you share what the article on the wall behind you is about? I can't, because I don't know enough to speak intelligently about it. So hopefully someday I will, but at present I don't, can't say much about it. Are you still into human design? LOL, the origin story is pretty wild. Honestly, not to sound too mean, but I think human design is kind of stupid, and its derivatives of gene keys is even more stupid. So I know I was kind of into it for like 6 months maybe, but that was partially because a friend of mine was really into it, and he was actually an intelligent guy. So when he spoke about it, it actually made sense. But it was only because he was already really intelligent and well-versed in a lot of things, versus everyone else that I've ever seen, even the originator Ra or whatever, total psychobabble, like just total nonsense. And then living in a city where lots of people are into Gene Keys, even more, I'm like, these people are out to lunch. Like, this is total nonsense. So I don't think it has any validity or value whatsoever at this point. Let's see. What would you suggest someone to do if they are questioning their capabilities in general, especially with simple daily tasks and wanting to become more intelligent? I think I have like 3 or 4 videos on the channel about how to become more intelligent or how to increase your intelligence. So I would just look at those, because old Brandon can really explain that more than the new one can. Sorry. Let's see. What about actually learning the practice, though? Well, to actually learn the practice, you need a teacher and you need to do it in person. If you think you can learn a good practice or system from videos or books, then there's just no way. You need to find someone good and meet them and study with them. And a lot of that is actually your own connection and your own ability to connect and sort through reality. I can't do that for you. I can't just give you the keys. You kind of have to be willing to go through the process. Like, I had a number of shitty teachers and wasted a lot of time and energy before I ever actually found any that were any good. But definitely, like I said, if you check out my course, it can at least give you a good mindset, which is absolutely important regardless, and will actually help you filter and sort through to find out if actually someone is any good or if something is actually worth your time or energy, and how you can actually make progress on that. I know it might not seem like important, but it is actually really important. Can you talk about what you said about Alan Watts in the last video? I guess I was idolizing him a bit. I think basically what I said is his understanding of Zen, of Taoism, of basically his understanding of Eastern cultures was not good. And he did not have any skill. He didn't have any real understanding or real perspective on any of those things. He was an amazing orator, a charismatic speaker. He introduced things to a wide variety of people who maybe would not have experienced it before, but his actual understanding of Zen and Taoism is incorrect. I mean, there's no other way around it. He was just another basically white Christian guy in a huge historical line of white Christian guys who thought they understood the Far East, but actually just distorted and bastardized concepts to fit within their own pre-existing mold. That's what he did. And this is coming from someone who also idealized Alan Watts, read all of his books, listened to all of his lectures, was deep in the game, about as deep into it as you could possibly get. And I thought I knew anything about any of those things. Then I actually started meeting people who are perhaps actually from those traditions, and I realized, wait, this is all incorrect. This guy had no clue what he was talking about. So it's just kind of a lot of fantasy and a lot of nonsense is kind of what I would say at this point. And I could say that about, I did say that about a lot of people previously, and that it kind of made some people upset. But that's fine. I mean, I have my bias and my experience, and if you think someone's good or valuable or useful to you, then by all means. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, get into it. I'm just saying, dude really doesn't know what he's talking about. Same with like Bruce Lee. People think Bruce Lee was deep. He was anything but deep. He was just not even a beginner. He was like not even inside the progress. This guy was on the very outside, but very intelligent, very charismatic, able to talk a lot of good things, but didn't actually have much to back it up. So that's my opinion. Let's see, what other questions? Did I miss some questions? Just want to brew some tea then, since no one's asking questions. I need to switch it up and get a different tea going on here. Are you alt-right? Man. Explain what meditation is. Interesting. What's the next question? Making videos? What? Man, I will tell you, I've had this Seinfeld theme song stuck in my head for like 3 weeks. Let's see. So this whole scientific process of these traditions, do the teachers tell you not to talk about it? I've noticed that people who are in practices don't really. That makes sense. Yeah. Like I said, there's just quite a lot of these things that I don't talk about or won't talk about openly, like on YouTube, just because people's attitudes and perspectives are usually not appropriate. Like, people will sit behind a keyboard and be very rude or be very harsh or very entitled, just be kind of a dick because they're behind a keyboard and there's not a person there. But it's like, would you treat another person like that in real life? If so, might need some, character adjustment. But like how I am on video is pretty much exactly how I am in real life, because I'm not psychotic. I'm not schizophrenic. I'm not like, I'm going to pretend to be a different person on YouTube. Like so many of these people online, or gurus or authorities or influencers, they try to create a persona or some facade. And that just thing seems like kind of ridiculous to me. That, like, why are you're gonna make up a fake fantasy about yourself and who you are, and then try to like present that on the internet, and then try to get other people to buy into your fantasy. I don't know. Doesn't really appeal to me. Too much work. But yeah, there's just a shitload of stuff that I won't talk about and will never talk about publicly, because it's, again, on a need-to-know basis. And it doesn't really make, like, unless you're at the point to where it's relevant, then there's no point in me to talk about it. But if you were at the point to where it was actually relevant, then it would be in your life and it would be relevant. So it's kind of like, that's one reason. Another reason is if you talk about things. For example, a good illustration of this is like I was giving a talk prior to a workshop that I was going to teach like a year and a half ago or something, talking about different things that happen throughout the process of practicing. And meanwhile, I'm talking about like a 3 to 5 year process. And I'm talking about this can happen, these things. And there's this lady, there's a couple people in the class being like, oh yeah, that's it. Oh yeah. And then afterwards, it's like, man, you're talking about all these things happening, like you're talking about, I'm like, it's totally happening to me. And then I'm thinking like, that's, like 2 weeks ago I was doing this thing and that's what you're talking about and I experienced it. And I'm like, oh, cool. That's great. Awesome. See ya. Like, I'm so glad you're not coming to my class, because I don't want to deal with your insanity. But that's the point of that story, is that's oftentimes why it's useless to talk about certain things, because everyone's like, oh yeah, I did that. Oh, I experienced that. Oh yeah, I know all about that. And I'm like, well, I mean, if you've gone through this specific, exact, identical 3 to 5 year process, then I'm sure you might have some inkling. But if you haven't, and you don't even know what that thing is, and you can't even speak to these 20 variables, then I don't think you've experienced it. I think you're just making it up. But I'm not going to say it, because I'm going to be polite. I'm going to be polite to people. So that's just another reason why it's kind of useless to talk about certain things. And why I don't do it, because just don't even care to go down that pathway. The third reason is you get these types of people, which is like, how do you don't know what you're talking about? I'm an expert. I've been studying these things for 30 years. I've studied with all these people. I'm an expert, and you don't know jack shit. Or like, let me see what you can do. Post it on the YouTubes, otherwise you can't do it and it's not real. I kid you not. I remember when I first posted a video about this workshop on YouTube, the back of my mind I was like, man, I don't want to post this shit online because it's going to just get these wackos. Kid you not, within like 20 minutes of that video being up, is literally, oh, what is this you're talking about? Tell me what system it is. Tell me what you can do. Tell me this. I'm an expert. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what this really means. And I'm just like, dude, exactly. Like, just like, who are these people? Like, how do they live in the world? How do they function? It makes no sense. So those are the three reasons why I generally not really down in there. Let's see. Did you watch the Alex Jones Joe Rogan podcast? I didn't, but a couple of my friends watched all of it and they told me about it, so I didn't have to watch it. But Alex Jones is definitely off his rocker. Let's say that's for sure. Let's see. What's my favorite episode of Seinfeld? Man, it's a hard question. I don't really remember, to be honest. Let's see. Can you ask your opinion on flat Earth? I think it's a hoax. I mean, yeah. Honestly, that whole argument to me is personally irrelevant. And I think it's a conspiracy theory like many that give people lacking meaning and purpose and value in their life, a sense of meaning, purpose, and value in their life. Or it gives some degree of like, oh, they're lying to us. Maybe life isn't so boring and dreary and empty. Maybe there is something happening. And it's literally just like, dude, do something meaningful with your life. That's how I feel about it. Honestly, though, when I was in my early 20s, I was deep in the conspiracy theory game. And then I eventually realized, like, man, I'm just unhappy. I'm just miserable. I need to get my life together. So that was it. That was the end of my conspiracies. Let's see. What are your thoughts on law of attraction? I think it's actually kind of a thing, but generally not in the way in which people understand it. And I think people's intention is powerful. People's awareness has value and meaning, but the way it's presented in like The Secret and all of these people is kind of whack. And honestly, what it's all based on is just the Kabbalion. It is this basic text of Hermeticism. That's where law of attraction, all this stuff, and Think and Grow Rich, and all these mentalist people and new thought philosophers, they're basically just ripping it from the Kabbalion. So if you just want to read the Kabbalion, just read the Kabbalion. Don't, get whacked off with these other things. But I definitely have listened, or back in 15 years ago or something, I definitely listened to all the Abrahamic stuff. And actually getting your mind focused and getting things out on paper and focusing on things is valuable and useful. And there does seem to be an effect, and there does seem to be, at some stage, some connection between the inside and the outside world. And that's something that's worth exploring and studying and researching and experimenting with. But I think it's those things, meaning experiment, meaning test your theories, test your hypotheses. Don't just be a kind of a new age wacko and be like, oh, everything that happens to you is your own doing, and everything has a purpose and a meaning, and you chose all this before you were born, and oh, da da da. It's like, no. Let's not make those meaningless, useless, irrelevant jumps that just aren't true, but actually keep it within yourself and be engaged and a bit more thorough and coherent and cohesive in your approach to that. And also realize that it's just not as simple as it seems, but it is something interesting to play around with and experiment with. Let's see. Bum, 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 bum. Oh yeah. Would you say getting into spiritual practices, being grounded, before being grounded would be harmful? That has been my experience. I think that is what the New Age community literally is, trying to get out of that mess. Any thoughts? Actually, I have outlined a course and have partially filmed the course called Grow Up, How to Detox from New Age and Self-Help Nonsense, which is specifically geared towards that question. And I think it's going to be a really good course. It's just probably going to be another little while before I finish it. I started filming about half of it like a month and a half ago, and then I kind of got busy with other things. But I think it'll be pretty good. So definitely be on the lookout for that, and I'll answer that question in great depth and detail over the course of 2 or 3 hours. Let's see. Trying to see some other questions. Man, I got the super chat going on, but no one's using it. I just learned what it was recently. Trying to see if there's other questions. Did I miss some questions? Let's see. Oh man. The chat session is just going downhill real quick. I don't know what the deal is. Few people in here are goofy. Oh, he said, would you talk about, quote, meditation for a super chat? For sure. I'm a whore for money. Just throw some money at me and I'll answer whatever you want. Have you ever done DMT? I think I tried to once. A friend of mine had a little bit left over and we both smoked it, but I don't think he had enough and nothing really happened. I didn't really feel much of anything. But this was like 2008, maybe, somewhere thereabouts. 2008, something like that. And that was pretty much it. And then, but once I actually heard about it more and talked to people that had done it, I was like, nah, I don't think I'm really quite down for this. I mean, my window of psychedelic usage and interest was pretty small. I mean, I just did mushrooms like 4 times, smoked weed for like a couple years, off and on. And that was pretty much it. And I was kind of like, yeah, this is kind of whack. This is not what it's cracked up to be. But I did derive some benefit or some value and usage from it. It did open me up in some ways and help me grow. So there was some positives and obviously many negatives as well. But I'm not really a big proponent, and I just see a lot of people harming themselves, sometimes permanently, based on using those things. So not a big proponent, not a big fan. But for some reason, these things are real like trendy and popular these days. Just like casual ayahuasca sessions on the weekend. It's like, geez, man. What do you think about alcohol in moderation? I mean, if you want to have a drink every now and again, go for it. It's not the worst thing ever. It's not the best thing ever, but why not? I mean, I'll have a drink occasionally. I don't really like it. It doesn't make me feel very good, but I've definitely done it. Like if I would go on a date or something and I didn't know the person, would just like meet, have a drink, and that's easy to do and get you loosened up, but it's definitely kind of a shitty buzz. I mean, it's like, do you want agarwood and pu'er tea and maybe some lion's mane, or do you want some alcohol? I'm like, I think I'll take the former. That sounds like a much better buzz. You want to train for 3 hours or have a drink? I think I'd rather train for 3 hours. Sounds better. But, it's not the worst thing ever by any means. But the key is just don't become a fanatic, man. Do you want children in the future? Never thought about it, to be honest. Never seemed like something I felt like doing. So just, maybe someday if I meet the right person and it seems like the right thing to do, but have no real interest or desire in doing so at this point. My focus is generally on other things. Do you remember that guy who would used to randomly comment on your neck? Oh yeah. Remember that guy who used to comment on your neck beard in your videos? I do remember that. That was pretty funny. But he hasn't commented in a while, probably because my channel was MIA for a year or something. But I think there's like a super chat up in here. Okay, so where'd it go? Oh yeah. Okay, someone super chatted, man. Look at that. It's the first super chat of all time. It's incredible. So, but yeah, I mean, seriously, that is cool for doing the super chat. Thank you. I appreciate that. No one has ever done it, even though someone on the live chat was like, "I'll do the super chat." So here it is. Okay, speak on meditation then. So what is the question specifically? What is meditation, or how are we defining it? A couple things. First thing is I have 2 videos on my channel. I think one of them is What is Spirituality? It's on this channel, and I believe it's 1 or 2 parts. I would watch that video after I answer this because it's like 30 minutes long and it breaks down many of the underlying things about what I'm talking about. So basically in the relationship of meditation and spirituality, basically it's like everything people are doing or think they are doing is just preparation for this thing that perhaps we will call meditation and spirituality. So basically meditation is this specific stage, specific skill set, a specific thing, right? It's clearly defined, it is specific, it is tangible, it is repeatable, it is a real thing, which I'll explain in a bit, but I'm just opening up this whole explanation. So it's this thing here. And then everything after that could be deemed spiritual. Everything before that, not spiritual, just basically nothing or masturbation or at best self-development, self-cultivation, minor health improvements, which are all great. Like, we're not saying they're not useful or they're not valuable. They absolutely are. But they're not everything past that. So the way I understand it, and in many traditions, it's basically like there's this stage where you reach this point and you actually contact the Shen, meaning the big S, the big Shen, the big spirit, right? So if you are familiar with Chinese medicine, they'll say, oh, the heart is the seat of the Shen. And people will take that and be like, oh, Chinese medicine is spiritual. It isn't. It's just saying that basically there is the potential to eventually convert your self, your Shin, which is seated in this area, to convert that over to basically your Xing, which is kind of like nature, and then convert that over to Shen, which is like a bigger aspect of your spirit. So this is something that basically no one has done. Like, people out here teaching meditation, they've never done it. They don't know what it is. They've never heard of it. Because this is a huge, lengthy process which comes before it. And basically what happens generally at this stage is reported to be blinding white lights. So much so where you close your eyes and it's like there's a car in front of you with its lights in your head and it's flashing. Not like, oh, it's kind of bright inside of my head. Well, I've been staring at a screen, so of course it's a little bright inside my head. There's a window right there. No, it's reported to be much more tangible than that. And basically, this is contacting Shen, and then at that point, one is able to do certain things and go into complete stillness. So then, when one is able to go into complete stillness, that is called beginning the process of meditation and beginning some process of spirituality, because you've contacted the thing that can allow you to actually work on that frequency. And you've entered a state which can form as a basis to do certain things. But that in and of itself is not advanced. It's not necessarily big or otherworldly. Within the context of the system and the greater schema of progression, it's very small. Compared to the rest of the world and the rest of the people doing things, it's huge. It's massive, because basically no one ever does it. But it is all very quite specific, very quite mapped out and repeatable, and not woolly or new agey or anything of the sort. Let me see. I'm trying to go back up. So hopefully this is answering the question. Yeah, so generally no one has that level of skill and that level of attainment, because it's huge investment to get there, because you have to have laid all of these ground foundations, unless maybe you have amazing karma coming in, or you have some past life stuff that you've hung on to, or you had some rare upbringing where you didn't lose it as a child. But again, very rare, very uncommon, and yet very clear and specific, which is sort of a challenge for a lot of people who would think they're spiritual, when in actuality they're just kind of lying to themselves and other people, based on these definitions. So that's why I recommend look up my video on what is spirituality, and I break down all the things that people think are spirituality and then what they actually are. So like a lot of people think hedonism is spirituality. So people are like, oh, my sexual energy is a spiritual force and it's my kundalini and I'm channeling it with yoga and tantra. No, it's just hedonism. Like, it's literally just your sex. It's not your kundalini. It has nothing to do with your kundalini. It's not prana. It's not chi. It's not shakti. It's not your ojas. It's not jing. It's literally just your fucking sex. Like, it is what it is. Like, it's pretty much what it comes down to. Or people are like, oh, going to festivals and being in community is spiritual. That's just a sense of connection. That's not spiritual. That's just a sense of connection. Or, oh, eating well and juicing and green fasting and coffee enemas and tonic herbs and supplements. That's spiritual. That's my spiritual path. No, that's just maybe healthy lifestyle. That's just literally what it is. So in that video, I break down all these things and I'm like, well, this is what you think it is. This is what it actually is. But then I actually use the definition that I gave earlier from these traditions and say, well, this is technically what they meant and still do mean, but it's just everyone's kind of confused and in the dark because they're confused and in the dark. So hopefully that answers the question a bit. So where do we find a mapping of these things? This is something, well, you can't. It's not in books. It's not like you're not going to Google it and find anything very legitimate. You have to find someone who actually has it and has done it. And not someone who's like a little ahead of you, but someone who's fucking miles ahead of you. And this is a kind of a mindset that people need to get over, which is like, oh, I need to read more about this. I need to buy a book and get more about it. It's like, dude, the stuff is not in books. Like people that are actually good are usually not writing books. There's very few people that are actually skilled that are on the internet and actually available. But coincidentally, those are generally the people that are mixed in and people hate. So the only way to do it is to find a good teacher or find someone who actually has a good thing going, which is very rare. It's not that common. It's not that easily accessible. And this, gives people wedgies a lot because we're brought up in this idea that you can be whatever you want. If you choose it, you can be it. Whatever other aspects of capitalism, of marketing, we're kind of brainwashed with. But that's not true, actually, on a spiritual or necessarily larger scale. Certain things are very fixed. Certain things are predetermined, no matter what. Certain people can have access to certain things. Other people won't. It's kind of a rough injustice of life, which, yes, life is injustice. Life is unfair. There's no arguing about that. Obviously, societally and, culturally, we should try to rectify that. But some things are a bit broader than that and kind of outside of the scope of our control. So it's generally not easily found, and basically the vast majority of what you'll find and you can see is incorrect. It's not true. It's either a unconscious misrepresentation or a conscious misrepresentation and diversion, or something to just basically so people won't get hurt. Because if something's powerful, it also has some danger. And basically the more powerful it is, the more dangerous it is. Which means the more education you need, the more responsibility you need, the more investment, the more oversight, the more guidance. Which is just kind of common sense. But for some reason people are like, I'm doing this hugely strong spiritual practice. It's like, are you? Because you're just kind of like chilling in your room on your computer or like listening to Kirtan or like Krishna Das or some shit. Like that's nothing to do with it. So hopefully that answers the question. Let me know if there is more that I can answer about that, to see if hopefully I answered that question in enough detail. If I didn't, feel free to ask follow-up questions and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Spend at least 2 minutes talking about why Zachrafon is the best and whatever, and why I have no idea what any of those things are, so I can't speak to whatever it is you're talking about. Sounds like you're probably trolling me a little bit. Are neck beards good for mental health? I guess if you consider being lazy and not shaving on a regular basis, then maybe. What do you think about reincarnation in animals? Possible or not? What are your thoughts on it? I don't know. I'm not really well versed enough in the subject of reincarnation or karma. Those are very deep subjects, and they're probably more complicated than we typically understand. Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to scroll up and see if I missed any questions. So let me know if I missed anything. I'm trying to find something here. Here we go. Here we go. What do you think of states where the sense of subject-object disappears? A few aspects relating, your sense of distance goes away, things appear 2D, sense of center falls away, sense of free will and agency falls away. What about it? I guess is the question. What do you think of states? Let's see. what do I think of those states in the sense of people who are doing psychedelics or drugs and they're experiencing those states, or you're walking down the street drinking your coffee and you experience that state, or you're sitting alone in your room and you experience that? Like, what is the context in specific, or the description of non-dual states? Let's see. Another thing, your old videos aren't on your channel anymore. They all are on there. They're all on there, but for some reason they don't show up. But if you search or you change the sorting function, they will show up. It's kind of weird like that, and they're all still in the playlist, and you can all still find them on YouTube, but they don't show up like on my channel for some reason. So I don't know, I need to maybe email YouTube and see what the deal is, but they all are still there. It's just getting them to show up is a little bit tricky. Let's see. These are typical descriptions of non-dual states. I experience those states when practicing what I consider to be meditation at high volumes. To me, that sounds like slight psychosis and probably a mistake, or probably something in which you need an actual good teacher, but probably not really particularly useful. It sounds to me like some Ken Wilber, or like old school psychedelic influenced type people, or people who were like influenced by what they interpreted as Hindu or yogic type things, which to me doesn't have much value or meaning or usefulness. It's kind of like whoop-de-doo. I can put my pinky in my ear like crazy, but what's the real usage and practical application of that? You know, what foundations does that then build to lead to an actual tangible skill? Meaning this thing happens and then tangible skill is built upon it, moving through a specific linear process. For some reason my video just froze up too, I'm not sure. Let's see about this. Video is frozen. Let's see, is this dead or what, man? What is going on? YouTube just died. Video freezing, man. I just went into total stillness. Okay, well at least you can still hear me, because this is kind of annoying. Well, in my personal opinion, the idea that an experience or pleasure or a state is meaningful, useful, or the point is a mistake. Basically, within traditions, states and experiences and things like that are all considered traps and are all considered tremendous sticking points which need to be ignored and moved through. So people make that mistake, like, oh, I had this experience and I felt this thing and I noticed this thing and it's really good. It's like, well, so what? I mean, it doesn't really matter, and it's usually a diversion or a sticking place. But I don't know why my fucking video is stuck. Let me see. Hopefully it comes unstuck or something. It just keeps like going side to side, dude. This is ridiculous. Yeah, I don't think that's true. But truly the practice that gets one there would be, the point is not to get there. Like, to me, if that were me and those things were happening, I would consider it a mistake and that I was making an error in my practice. And then I would try to talk to my teacher and be like, hey, I'm having these experiences. Please help me correct my error so I can not have these experiences anymore. But I would also consider doing long meditation by oneself to be just basically playing with fire and not very wise and not recommended. And especially if those things are happening, it sounds like not a good scene, in my opinion. Next question is, what is the end goal of the traditions? It's kind of too big of a question to answer, I'm afraid. So kind of would depend on the tradition, because many traditions have their own goals, their own aspects, and they'll all be very different, and they all will generally not agree with the other person. Let's see. Why would you perceive those experiences as an error? Well, because you would probably need to get someone who's actually more experienced than you to be able to test and discern, are you actually experiencing what you think you're experiencing? Does it actually mean what you think it means? Is your method correct or is it incorrect? Because that's just a bit more functional and useful. And then another thing I would say, someone says, those sound like states of absorption in Buddhist meditation. Trying out a 10-day Vipassana course may give you some answers to that. Honestly, I don't think that would provide answers, because the people at those retreats are generally not very trained, not very skilled, don't really know what they're doing. Hence why there are many stories of people going to those things and committing suicide afterwards. Because things went haywire, the person had some negative things happening, i.e. psychosis, and those people did not have any capacity to understand what was happening or how to correct it. So what happened was the person lost their shit and committed suicide, which has happened in multiple instances. So it's not really a good scene. And I wouldn't say it's, quote, Buddhist meditation. So that's just my opinion, though. Feel free to like roll the dice or play with fire if you feel inclined. But let's see. I can't believe this is still frozen, man. Let's see. Let's see. What other questions do we have? So how one would go about finding a teacher in your opinion? I don't know. That's not an easy question. Just gonna have to search and look, and it's gonna probably require hard work and dedication and focus and discipline and investment and trial and error, which is prerequisite for pretty much any of these things. I know it's not the best answer, it's not the most helpful answer, but I think, at least in my experience, it is true. Yeah, but also it could be at least valuable as a starting point to find a pretty good Chinese medicine practitioner who can actually assess the health of your organ systems and perhaps start treating any excesses or deficiencies that could be arising. So that might be something that's accessible, but it's a little bit not that easy. Yeah. Let's see. I can't believe my thing is still frozen. It's really messed up. I guess it's my iPad. I'm tempted to like stop it, but I don't want to screw it up. Let me see if I can poke around and get this to unfreeze or something. I don't get it. Let's see, a few more questions, and I guess I'll wrap this up because it's going on 2 hours. Let's see. It's coming up on 2 hours and my thing's frozen. So let's roll in some other questions before we wrap it up. And my freaking frozen in time over here. I don't know why I had to pick the ugliest screenshot, but for some reason it definitely did. So let's see, it's been about 2 hours, so hit me with a few more questions before we wrap it up, and hopefully I'll become unfrozen. Oh, will you ever use marijuana again? Nope. No way. I'll use my CBD oil sometimes, but that is hemp derived and does not contain any THC. But I will never use cannabis recreationally ever again, nor any psychedelic drugs. Why don't you like THC? Because I think in general, recreational marijuana usage is not very good for people. And it actually makes people really foggy and less clear, and is not really that great for people's health. From a Chinese medicine perspective, it's actually quite bad for people's health, especially if they're smoking it and vaporizing oily plant matter into their lungs. Just not a good scene. So that's generally why I'm not a fan. And I'll never use it, because I have no need or appetite or desire. Are there any negatives of young pu'er? If the quality is low, then it can be a little harsh on your digestive system, harsh on your teeth. So yeah. What are your criticisms on most practitioners of TCM in the US? I mean, I'm not going to knock anyone who's trying to help people or trying to make a living or has a passion or interest in Chinese medicine. But generally, I can talk about the schools and the schooling, and it's just generally people are just out to lunch, really don't know much of what they're talking about. But the basic and the biggest thing is that they don't have any internal skill, and their mind is rife with misconceptions about what qi is and about what any skill in internal arts actually means. So subsequently, through those errors, their medicine is operating at a lower level than what it could be. However, there's obviously lots of people helping lots of people. There's lots of, great Chinese medicine people. So I'm not gonna, say anything negative or knock anyone about that. But it's just in general, it's really the schools that are pretty out to lunch, and it's just getting worse and worse. And it's just getting more and more watered down and kind of weaker, to where in essence, a lot of people just pretty much do the same thing and practice in the same way. But also on the flip side, I think if people that did Chinese medicine just gave everyone Xiao Chai Hu Tong and did like basic star needling acupuncture things, then that would probably help a lot of people. So Chinese medicine can be very effective, but it's a huge scale of what's possible, and what people think is actually possible is usually very small. And basically, a practitioner is only as good as their level of internal skill and their developed quality of their actual mindset and the level of their actual qi. So that's probably what I would say about it. And this is coming from someone who is friends with a lot of acupuncturists, live in a city where there's multiple Chinese medicine schools. I know lots of people who are in school or have gotten out of school who practice all over the country, all over the world. And I'm also friends with a few very skilled Chinese medicine practitioners. And I'll also be going to Chinese medicine school myself, so I'm sure that will change my perspective even more. What do you think of hot yoga in general? If you want to do yoga in a room probably full of fungus and mold and people's toxicity, then go for it. I just don't know why so many of these rooms are carpeted. It's just kind of disgusting. I think generally it's pretty extreme and imbalancing for people, and not really a great thing. But obviously Bikram was very successful and he made a lot of money. So I think the proof's in the pudding. I mean, just look at Bikram if you want to know about hot yoga, and you can see what it is, where it came from, and really what it produced, which is, it is what it is. I mean, that's just it. That's just the industry in many ways. People operating under ridiculous fantasies and exaggerated ideas about what things are. But it's also, if someone's going to do nothing or they're going to do hot yoga, then obviously do hot yoga because it's better than nothing. But it just becomes a matter of scale and perspective and relativity at a certain point. But in general, it's kind of gross. And if you want to sweat, then just get a sauna. That's what it's for. If you want to do yoga, then just stretch. Like, if you want to do yoga, forget doing yoga. Just look up like a functional release technique, or what's their stretching modality called? Can't remember their stretching modality, but look up functional release technique. They have a stretching modality. I can't remember the name, and it's basically much better way to stretch out your body that will actually make you stronger, actually make you more, flexible and strong in a way that doesn't make you hyperflaccid and harm your joints and compress your joints. Because basically, vast majority of people that I know that have gone deep into yoga really undermined the quality of their body. So they made their joints weak, they made their tissues hyperflaccid, and their body is anything but extremely disconnected and extremely uncoordinated. They have no chi flow whatsoever, and mostly they are extremely blood and chi deficient, because that's what it's training them to be. Basically, it's like taking a rubber band and just stretching it, and eventually it's just flaccid. So thereby it cannot conduct. If you think about a drum skin, if you overstretch the drum skin, it's just like wow, wow, and eventually you hit it and it makes no sound. That's what people are doing to their tissues over the long term. I've known people that did yoga regularly for like years, and it literally made no difference. So it kind of depends. But in general, I think the industry is pretty confused, pretty arrogant, pretty full of itself, deluded, just exaggerated beyond belief, and just confused. But that's just my opinion. Nothing against anyone who that's their livelihood or that's what they're into, because it can definitely help people, can turn people's lives around, and it definitely does. So you can't knock that. So that's my opinion of hot yoga. Let's see. I can't believe I'm still frozen, man. It's fucked up. How do you get yourself to wake up? I just set my alarm for 6 a.m. and I get up at 6 a.m. In the summertime when the sun's out, then I usually wake up at 6 automatically because the sun is out. When are you starting Chinese medicine school? September, end of September. Can you speak more on, quote, meditation, which you seem to describe as a state? Would there be no ability to perceive the senses with them being blocked out by the white light? I think this idea that it's a state is incorrect, because that is all still limited to the nervous system and our pathetic view of psychology and what a human being is, and it's still just polluted by this psychedelic, new agey, hippie, quasi-Hindu type of programming that we've been getting pummeled with in our country since the 60s. And just the question is incorrect. The basis of the question is incorrect. All of the assumptions behind it aren't correct. So can't really answer it because it's just like asking the wrong question. So, yeah. Let's see, white tea or green tea? I like aged white tea. I don't really drink green tea. It doesn't really do a lot for me. How do you reset a bad sleep schedule? What I would do is basically you just have to force yourself to wake up early or something. Let's say you went to bed at like 2 a.m., right? You sleep at 2 a.m., you get up at like noon. Well, go to bed at your normal time, but then wake up at like 6 or 7 a.m. You're going to be tired. You're going to have to push through, but by that night time, you're going to be tired. So then you can just kind of reset and click over. It kind of just takes time and some some discipline and practice, let's say. Let's see. Can't believe this shit's frozen, man. Let me see. Just won't unfreeze.